you know? I legitimately half expected someone, I don't know, the ushers, security, somebody, to stop me at the door. But nobody did, and I saw it. I watched SpongeBob the Musical this weekend.
You're watching Musical Theater Mash.
I must get two big disclaimers out of the way. First, this is an out-of-town pre-Broadway tryout. They are testing this musical, and I want to give everyone involved in this production full benefit of the doubt, right? They're trying things. They're still figuring it out, and that's wonderful. And so, of course, some things may not be the best they can be or the way they want them. They're giving themselves room to make those tweaks, and it's important to acknowledge that. And second, I just want to zoom out just for a hot moment to acknowledge that my life has now become a world where I go to SpongeBob the Musical with the explicit intention of seeing it so I can talk to people on the internet who are interested about my opinions about it, and that will always be a little weird. Kinda cool, but weird. But cool. Yeah? Okay, the show. I enjoyed myself. There were legitimate moments where I laughed and thought some of the jokes were very funny. And you know, there was a lot of really honest, heartfelt art making going on here, and it struck a really nice balance. Like, let's say there's a continuum of franchise productions. On the one hand, you have something like Shrek the Musical, which aims very much to just be an exact reproduction of the movie everyone knows on stage. Feels very money-grabbing, you know, is not very interesting, doesn't do anything innovative. On the other end of the spectrum, you end up with the, you know, forever in previews production of Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, with a deep, strange, shoehorned concept overlaid over a pre-existing franchise in a way that very much upsets its hardcore base. I would say, at least right now, SpongeBob the Musical does a surprisingly nice job at landing right in the middle of those two. A faithful, interesting reproduction of this cartoon world you know, brought to the stage in some really interesting and frankly very beautiful scenic and production concepts. I mean, hands down, the part of this show that really shines is the design, the production design, the scenic design, the costume design, the lighting design, the sound design, the projection design. It's worth it alone just to see it for those things. And on that note, technically, the cast is fantastic. They are very well committed. They are wonderfully faithful representations of these cartoon characters on stage, but with their own spin on it in interesting and exciting ways. All that is great. The musical itself, I would say, surprisingly, needs some work. Like, the script, the book, the songs, how they all fit together. You know this already, it's been widely reported. A whole bunch of artists contributed songs to this show, and each of the characters you'd expect, everyone from SpongeBob and Squidward and Patrick to Sandy to Mr. Krabs to Plankton to Pearl Krabs, all have their own songs, all written by separate artists. And that makes for a real lack of cohesion throughout the story. I don't want to get into too many details of the plot of this show. I mean, it just opened, and spoilers and discussion of the plot could actually be detrimental to the future success of this show, and I would never want to do that. But the plot is just kind of scattershot and spinning in all sorts of different circles that don't really cross in very interesting ways. It feels like a jukebox musical written around original songs. And so the question I have for Tina Landau, if she's not too mad at me and if I may be so blunt, is what was and what will continue to be the collaboration process around this multi-artist musical. Like, if there's only one song by the Plain White T's in the show, you can't cut that song, or you can't really go to They Might Be Giants every night with notes about how the performance went and suggestions for changing. And that sort of process is the bread and butter of these out-of-town tryouts and previews and the rewriting and improving of musical theater. And all the good musicals you know now would not be where they were it not for this collaborative rewriting and improving and cutting and redrafting of the musical. With 20 collaborators, that's rough. And it shows. And that harkens back to my original frustrations with this show, that it feels like a star-studded, name-filled money grab. And it is sacrificing the potential quality of this show for those names in the playbill and on the marquee. And there is, I think, wonderfully, some potential for quality in this show. There's a good musical buried under there somewhere. The A-plot, a lot of the main storytelling, a lot of Tina Landau's directing choices are beautiful and were some of the most moving parts of the show. And they were the non-singing parts of the show. They were the non-musical theater parts of the show. Like, if you cut out the cruft of the show, you'd have a really good musical SpongeBob episode on stage, and it would only be 1 act long. But the question that hit me right before Act 1 ended, as I looked around at this filled house of opening weekend patrons, and thought to myself, is this show for me? Right? Like, obviously I went to the show because I love musical theater, and also I enjoy SpongeBob because I was brought up on SpongeBob, but I don't watch SpongeBob anymore because I'm a grumpy old adult and, you know, instead talk to a camera in my apartment in my free time. And the children in this audience, and there were a lot of children in this audience, went wild for this show. They loved every minute of it, and by the end of it, covered in quite a lot of confetti. They were having the time of their life. And my opinion at that point doesn't matter if I'm no longer the demographic for this musical. To an extent, that's a bit of a shame. I think you can always have a multi-demographic show, like, you know, the Disney movies that appeal to kids and their parents. You can find ways to make pieces of art that do that, but you don't have to be successful. And clearly you don't have to feel like and look like a legitimate piece of theatrical art. So, who knows? I think definitely to be a success, the show still needs some work. Some moments very much shine, some moments seem very much phoned in and extra and unnecessary, and that's fine. That's what this is about. They should be working on the show. It should be under construction at this point. And that's where the bigger issue of the entertainment companies, Nickelodeon, underwriting this show come into play. My hope is that the suits and the executives in the boardrooms, the people who are shepherding this show and this brand and the intellectual property of SpongeBob, are giving all the necessary artistic license and artistic freedoms to these wonderfully talented artists who are working on this show that, in its best moments, was surprisingly entertaining. I'm sure this isn't the last we're hearing of SpongeBob the Musical, or these name brand musicals that seem to keep popping up more regularly. They just announced today that they're doing a Monopoly musical, and you can bet the bank that I'll be complaining about that one too. But everyone wants to see Hamilton anyway. Who am I kidding? People just want to go see Hamilton. Why go see SpongeBob when you can see Hamilton? I do want to get a little technical theater nerdy. If you worked on the projection design for this show, one, I'm sorry for shit-talking your show. Your projections were beautiful, but I could not figure out. They did this thing. There were projectors everywhere, pointed at the whole stage, and it made it very cartoony, and like things could pop up and disappear. It was great. It was very effective, but they would do this thing where someone would be carrying something they were using as a screen, like a round kiddie pool or these big porthole set pieces, and the set pieces would move, and the projection would be masked and would track the set piece in very organic, seemingly unrehearsed ways. And I don't know if they're using a new piece of technology or it's just very well rehearsed, but it was so cool. It was so cool, and I want to know how they did it. If you know how they did it, I want to know. Okay, I'm done. That's it. Enough SpongeBob.